But now I will move into my halfback discussion. Now look, this is very subjective. Obviously, I did a few stats on it and they did shape my opinions a little bit. I will start by saying Sam Walker and Tom Dearden are not included in this because I don't have enough sample size for them yet, as Sam Walker's only been around for 2 months. But this is my top 15 halfbacks in the competition, and I will admit there's a little bit of bias here and there to a few players and a little bit of bias against some players, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Adam Cloone, I've got at number 15. He's currently the St. George reserve grade halfback, but I think he's actually a very good player. I think when he played last year, he did a very, very good job. And yeah, I think he's a very, very solid player and probably deserves a gig somewhere else in the near future if a team needs a halfback. I know he's not young, so he's not the most inviting prospect, but I think he's a good player. 14, I've got Kyle Flanagan. Obviously, it hasn't worked out for him yet at the Bulldogs, but still think he's a good player, good game manager, and with a good side around him, I still think he's got a future in the competition. Number 13, I've got Chanel Harris-Tavita. I really like him in defence. He looks for a big shot, and pretty much every week he'll give you a big shot. And yes, that aggression in defence sometimes is also his downfall, but probably not consistent enough in terms of attack. But he's a good young player. Interested to see how he goes in the rest of his career. Number 12, I've got Jake Clifford. He wouldn't have been in this list at the start of the year, but he's had a really, really good 6 weeks or so. Looking like he's going to be a solid player. Not sure how it's going to work with Mitchell Pearce in Newcastle when Pearce gets back to full fitness, but for now, with Pearce's injury, I'm sure he'll do a serviceable job for the Knights. At number 11, I've got Ben Hunt. Now, statistically, Ben Hunt should be a lot higher if you just look at the stats, but I don't think he has that much impact on games. I know he was really good in the first month of this year, but yeah, I think in the last 2 years, he has a lot of wobbly games here or there where you hardly even notice him on the park. So like Friday night, I didn't really notice him against the Tigers. So I got him 11th. Number 10, Chad Townsend, similar to Ben Hunt. Statistically, he's a top 5 halfback in the comp. But if you watch a Sharks game, you rarely notice him. The Cowboys obviously rate him highly, bringing him in on a pretty big deal next year. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, for me, he's a little bit overrated. But number 10, still a good effort. Number 9, I've got Mitchell Pearce. On his days, a very good player, but I think his days are few and far between now. That sounds pretty disrespectful, but you know what I mean. Like, he used to be on song every second week, and now it's probably once a month. But the injury issues are starting to add up for Pearcey, but I think he's still a very, very good player who can still add a lot more to the game. Number 8, I've got Sean Johnson, very inconsistent player throughout his career, but he's now becoming a bit more reliable, you'd have to say. I think now we know what you're going to get from Sean Johnson. He's not going to really light up a game anymore with dazzling pace or steps, but he's a lot more controlled and he's still a very creative player. But I think he's number 8 for me, and I still think if I was a team without a great halfback, I'd still be looking at him next year as a free agency option. Maybe not a young team looking for a rebuild, but if you're a team with a pretty solid team elsewhere and you just need someone who's going to do a very good job for 2 or 3 years, I think Sean Johnson's not a bad option. Number 7, this is probably controversial. Obviously, a lot of talk about him this year, but I've got Adam Reynolds in at 7. I think he is a little bit overrated. I think he's one of the best kicking halfbacks in the comp, and he's a good game manager, but I just think he doesn't need to create as much as some of the others on this list because of the stars around him. And I will be interested to see how he goes in Brisbane. Everyone is excited about that selection, but I'm interested to see how he goes because he doesn't have the creative talent around him in Brisbane as he has this year at South Sydney. Number 6, I've got Luke Brooks. Probably a little bit biased, but the last month in particular has shown how good he can be on his day. Can really take the game by the scruff of the neck with his running game, and his kicking game has definitely come along this year, and he's averaging a lot of kick meters per game, and he's starting to create a lot of try-scoring opportunities with his little chip kicks to Adam Dewey and stuff like that. Jamal Fogarty is my number 5, possibly a smoky up this high, but statistically is very, very good. And last year, I think it was a big reason why the Titans almost stuck into the top 8. I know a lot of the media scrutiny goes on to Ash Taylor and AJ Brimson when you talk about the Titans' creativity, but I think Jamal Fogarty is a very, very solid halfback. And yeah, he's a pretty experienced player, not in terms of games in the NRL, but he's played rugby league at a high level for a long time, and I think that shows in a lot of his games. He does tend to go missing every now and then, but still a good player, Number 4, I've got Mitchell Moses. Mitchell Moses is a tough one to judge. He can often look like he's doing a lot more than he actually is. He gets a lot of touches on the ball. He fires a lot of big passes around, but a lot of the times he just goes back and forth side to side. But I still think he's a pretty good player. And when the Panthers are up and when the Parramatta Eels are up and running, him and Guther are electric off the back of that. So he's my number 4. They re-signed him last week, I think it was, with Ryan Madison, so they obviously think highly of him. Number 3, I've got one of the most informed players in the comp, Jerome Hughes. A bit more like Luke Brooks in terms of a halfback, not really a ball player. Well, he is a ball player, and he's also a kicker, but a lot more of a running halfback. That's kind of the way it's been at Melbourne since Cooper Cronk left. They kind of let Cameron Smith do the ball playing, and then the halfback along with 5/8 and fullback all kind of were just dangerous runners. Obviously this year he's had to step up and do a little bit more ball playing and kicking, but still very, very dangerous when he has the ball in hand, and he's been electric this year. Huge reason why the Storm are doing so well, even without Cam Munster, Pappenhausen and Grant. Number 2, I've got Cherry Evans. I think the number 2 and number 1 spot are pretty locked in for most people in the comp. He had a slow start to this year. You were maybe questioning whether he was past it, but Turbo came back, and I think it's allowed Cherry Evans to play with a lot more freedom. And I think when he was younger, he was a very structured half, but I think his creativity is actually underrated. You see him on the weekend, he was going for a lot of early kicks, kicking on second, third tackle, looking for 40-20s out of his own end. And he's not afraid to take the game on. I think he's, I know this, I haven't taken this into account, but he seems like a ripper bloke. Always smiling and laughing on the field, which I do like in sports players. And he's obviously the Queensland number 7, and deservedly so. And number 1, I think it's pretty obvious, right up there with the best player in the competition. I think the gap between number 1 and number 2 is pretty big here, but Nathan Cleary, absolute superstar. Scary to think how young he is and how he could continue to do this for another 10 years. Really intrigued to see how many Dally M's he wins, to be honest. This year it looks like it could be his to lose, with Turbo hunting him down though. But yeah, if he plays like this, I couldn't see why he doesn't win 4 or 5 Dally M's, to be honest. He's just freakish. I know there's a lot of guns coming through at 18, 19, 20 years old, but he is probably the pick of the bunch out of that next generation, and hopefully he leads the Blues to a bit of a dynasty, but we'll see. But yeah, Nathan Cleary, absolute gun. So hopefully you've found my opinions a little bit interesting. I'm sure you're disappointed with how low your team's halfback is, but let me know what you think. If I had any guys way too high, way too low, I'm interested to hear what you think.
It's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.